I know when you had mentioned to me that when you went to college, you got to do a lot of media studies and talk about game violence and game censorship. They didn't have those when I went to school. So I'm going to ask you, is this something that should still be debated? What is your take on what you saw?
So, I guess as a gamer or as a person who plays video games, I was watching this ready for a fight as laid out in the title of the film, Mortal Kombat. And you didn't really get a lot of combat out of it because, it wasn't pitting people head to head, right? It was, someone saying their piece and then someone else is saying their piece and then the topic shifts. It was very even-handed. But what I kind of drew from this is a very, and I again, Lorne, what you were doing in the film I thought was really great. And I think it really inspires, I think it should inspire people to debate this issue positively, rather than essentially trying to go, because it's very easy to tear down Jack Thompson, right? I mean, when you've got all these ridiculous straw man arguments that don't stand up to the barest amount of scrutiny, it's very easy to tear those down. Why not do that? Why not just shift the focus of the debate to something else entirely, to a positive message coming from you, and steer people away from that? And that was what really surprised me a lot about the film, and that was what I really enjoyed about it. What was the question?
Well, okay, so we talked about you had studied violence
Yes.
in video games and media studies, which again they didn't have when I was in college. So, is this still the same debate? Has your mind changed since you wrote your paper? Has it?
I mean, again, as was mentioned in the film, I think as people get older, the tone of the debate changes because people are starting, I think, with the assumption that, rather than go into the debate with the assumption that perhaps video games are bad and that you need to convince people that video games are bad, I feel like everybody, now, especially now, everybody in college, especially now, everybody who's growing up, is starting with the assumption that video games on the whole are probably good, and that what we're debating is not the medium, but some fringe element of the medium. What I kind of found, I mean, referencing the work that I did, and this was in sort of a paper that I did in my senior year, was looking at up to that point the history of controversial video games, right? I mean, Mortal Kombat was not, by any stretch of the imagination, the first controversial video game. If we were to pick out that, it was Death Race. And that was one of the very, very first video games. It was a black and white video game, and it was just black and white arcade Grand Theft Auto distilled down to its most purest element, which was there were pedestrians, and you were in a car and you hit them, and the number of pedestrians you hit was the number of points you got. And this was hugely controversial, right? I mean, there was Mothers Against Video Games appearing on Donahue, and just all up in an uproar. And you can actually go play this game here in San Francisco. It's in the Musée Mécanique, which is a museum of old arcade amusements mostly. And there's a few arcade games, and Death Race is one of them. And it's stick figures. It is a stick car with stick figures in black and white. And it was incredibly controversial. And so, of course, this was just going to happen over and over and over again. And what I found, very interestingly, was that there was always evidence, whether it was in Stephen Kent's book or whether it was in newspaper articles that I looked up, that any video game that was controversial, any video game that drew ire, was talked about on television, and was singled out as being this horrific perverter of children's minds, always sold about twice as many copies as it had any right to. Whether it was Night Trap, whether it was the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat, whether it was the Super Nintendo version, whether it was Death Race, you always had people saying, man, I love getting this game on the news because we sold so many units of these compared to the other games. Custer's Revenge for the Atari 2600, everything like that. And so to do this, to single out games and to point to them, is actually enhancing the notoriety. It's actually enhancing the visibility of these games in a way that it seems to only benefit people who are making them.
So getting back to, you were talking about the fringe, I'm going to actually ask Dean, since Dean's been in probably the most mainstream press of us here. Is there something to the story about the fringe and how far people are pushing things? And, do we have a responsibility as an industry?
I think our eventually get to that question, but I have a few sort of observations about watching the film. This is about the second time I've watched it. And
somebody has a great ringtone, by the way.
And my reaction to the film actually proves a lot of the things that are said in it. It's a piece of media, and I react to it. Right? I had some tears streaming down my face for a few parts of the movie. So it triggers an emotional response. It's a piece of media that triggers an emotional response. It's 82 minutes of talking heads, right? There's no action in this movie, but it's pretty riveting, right, in a lot of ways. And a lot of times, the part that I always thought was brilliant about the film is the juxtaposition of the images with what people are saying. You never see that anywhere else, where somebody's saying something, you're thinking something, and that image that they're talking about, you're thinking about, appears on the screen right next to the person. So I thought, that's just brilliant filmmaking. And I would never show this movie to my kids. As a parent now, I got 3 kids, and not until they're well into their adult years, would they be capable of understanding what's in it, and also the images themselves. They're just so over the top, so violent. There's so many things that just provoke your reaction, your emotional reaction in that film. And then the other points that I would get around to talking about here are that the idea that your reaction to media evolves or changes, right? So when my brother was killed, I really closed off a part of my mind, right? And eventually I talked in the film about desensitizing myself to violent games and being able to separate entertainment from reality again at some point. And I think what Lorne had said about, opening your mind is a very difficult thing. Well, I play violent video games now. I play more and more violent video games than I have in the past. Some of the best things out there. Very, very much looking forward to Modern Warfare 2. I'm playing Uncharted 2 right now. So that process of desensitization is really almost, getting complete with me. But I still think, this creepy feeling you get, it lingers in ways. Like, playing Grand Theft Auto, where you are presented, Grand Theft Auto 4, where you're presented with the choice of whether to shoot somebody who's lying there in front of you or not. And you can influence the direction of which way the game will go based on whether you shoot that person who's just helpless. I think that I no longer feel like I have to play a good guy game. I think it is actually a valuable experience to play bad people in games. You actually learn something from it. That's part of the process of opening your mind. I said it in the film. I thought it was a pretty good line about you are who you pretend to be, so careful about who you pretend to be. But I don't think that's true. And so have evolved my thinking to the point where every person basically should come down to the personal choice of here's what's okay with me as far as what I'm going to do with this video. I think it's important you think about it still, but you don't necessarily have to put that restriction upon yourself and say, I will not see the worst of this or behave in the worst way. It is entertainment.